Comparative patterns, gates and thresholds, where the living pause, rivers, mounds, pyres and doors. All underworlds start at a scene, a place or moment where the living perform a small, codified act that opens a path. Thresholds are social technology as much as mythic stagecraft. The world hands you a door in many forms, a river's lip, a mount's grassy seam, a smoking pyre, a dark cave mouth, the hush of an evening feast day, and asks that you do something sensible before anyone passes. These are not theatrical props, but practical bits of civic engineering. Light the pyre properly, so the neighbors don't have to explain the smoke. Leave the coin or the bowl where the current will take it. Close the lid and say the name. The ritual is, in effect, a receipt. We remembered you, we provisioned you, and we registered your passage. Do the small things well, and the scene reads your paperwork in the right language. Water marks thresholds across continents. Rivers, seas, cenotes, and lake edges function as seam lines because their edges are literally mobile. Currents carry, tides judge, the plunge revives a body's at rest. Crossing water is a tidy metaphor that became habit. On the Styx, one might pay an obol. At the beginning, you throw a gift into the surf. In Xibalba, the Senate receives pottery and petition. Water's liminality is practical. It's a channel that both moves, refuse, and rouse the honored. And myth codifies how to treat it with respect. So, in short, don't be surprised that boats and coins show up a lot. They are excellent transport and even better paperwork. Now, not all doors are plunged, some are walked. Roads and bridges make the crossing into an itinerary. The Helvega is a road, measured in mounds. Midlands northward pilgrimage is a stage journey that requires kit. The Sirat is a single bridge whose narrowness compresses a life into a single decisive step. Thresholds that are journeys towards a community to think in time. Food must be buried, songs sung repeatedly, names called at intervals. Long roads require long obligations, and the living keep those obligations by ensuring a traveler is provisioned and known at each stop. The ground itself opens. Barrows, caves, fissures, and sinkholes are local mouths. Places that anchor cosmogony in rock and soil. They tie memory to place. A mound remembers a family, a cave remembers offerings, a fissure remembers the seed time when the soil was first turned. These earth doors make landscape a ledger. A cairn is a durable entry on the ledger. A cave offering is a deposit that accrues favor. An unloved mound is an unpaid bill the ancestors will notice. Every threshold wants a passport, objects, obols, clay dogs, gravegood, revers, veils, bowls of food. Function is prosthesis for passage, portable credentials that declare status, profession, affiliation, and intent. They are practical, tools for the road, tokens for the belonging, or the literal dinner a traveler will need. Leaving the right item at the right place is like handing the ferryman a wallet ticket and not an IOU written in the margin of a hymn. Time is as much a gate as stone or water. You see, festivals, funerary timetables, year and a day observances, and the last hour motives concentrate the theme into moments when everyone knows they must be exact. Samhain's Thin evening, the 49th day of visitation, the 4-year pilgrimage. These temporal thresholds standardize obligation and make communal action efficient. When a calendar calls, the neighborhood mobilizes, rites are performed en masse, offerings distributed, and the scene is serviced with maximal competence. Domestic thresholds matter because much of the work is small and close to home. The hearth, the temple's central pillar, the funeral pyre, the peristyle. These are places where private acts have public consequence. Naming, ablution, libation. Short gestures, but they do the heavy lifting. The household's repetitions operate as constant maintenance. The scene remains usable because families do the steady, tedious work that rites require. So think of it as municipal maintenance carried out with incense and good manner. The comparative takeaway is blunt and useful. Thresholds are never merely symbolic. They are actionable protocols that encode who owes what, who will carry what, and how passage is to be managed. Myth hands you the vocabulary. Practice does the accounting across oceans and centuries. The same logic recurs. Specify the theme, designate a token, perform the rite, and update the ledger by song or stone. Neglect any step, and consequences tend to be stubbornly terrestrial. Missing children, barren fields, or, at a minimum, a very grumpy ancestor with an excellent memory. If there is a single modest exhortation hidden in these old practices, it is civic rather than mystical. Do your small task well, keep the record tidy, tend the place where the living pulse. Threshold work is how societies translate loss into responsibility, grief into sustained obligation, and death into a managed passage rather than a bubbling absence. It is practical, and, if one may be indulgent, curiously comforting that every culture found a way to make this theme addressable. Rancid and Psychopomps, those who shepherd the thin places. Across cultures, the crossing is not an accidental stroll, but a choreographed handoff. Ferrymen, dogs, Valkyries, angels, and a long roster of specialists arrange the route so that the soul does not simply vanish, but is guided, tested, and accounted for. The lesson the word repeats is plain. Passage is managed, and management has professionals. There are professionals for the job. Charon sits with a coin and a blunt sense of job description. Xolotl walks beside the dead like a dark, efficient hound. Inpo, or Anubis, measures and leads with the precise courtesy of a ritual undertaker. Valkyries pick and deliver with martial discretion. Jiosung Zaja, in Korea, psychopompic dogs and birds in many lands. Each functions like a civic transporter, someone you'd rather have on your side when the road narrows. They guide, adjudicate, and sometimes adjudge, but mostly they keep the itinerary moving. Household and priestly mediators do the preparatory labor. Ungan and Manbo choreograph procession and offerings. Priests anoint and pray. Shamans drum, Amautas sing the place names. These specialists hold the practical grammar. Songs, passwords, libations, and gestures that make crossings legible. They are the logistics team. If you need a route authorized, they know which rites to perform and which to write down in the family's account book. Sometimes the crossing is embodied rather than postponed. Possession, spirit mounting, and train trance are transit technologies in their own right. Voodoo's lure may inhabit the living vehicle. A shaman's journeys on a drum spine. Tibetan Baldo practices instruct the dying mind to recognize visions. The boundary can become porous by design. Temporary inhabitation, a provisional stewarding of soul and song, so that movement happens before the body's last acts. Tests, passwords, and ritual knowledge appear everywhere as safe conduct. The hero twins trials in Xibalba, Egyptian funerary spells that recite names like keys, Gnostic syllables whispered as passports, Tibetan Bardo instructions that tell the dying what to recognize. And these are not decorative law, but technical manuals. Knowing the right name, the right matter, the right offering often changes a crossing from a perilous to possible. Transit is also collective work. Libation chains, funerary feasts, communal drumming, and the year and a day rites distribute psychopompic labor across a kinship network. A community does not outsource the soul's passage to a single agent. It fields a chorus of support, songs, food, named remembrances, and specialists, so that the crossing is both communal performance and social insurance. Now, a comparative takeaway. The dead rarely travel alone. Cultures outsource guidance to creatures, priests, songs, and caches of material tokens. They teach passwords and sing routes. They appoint ferrymen and train shamans. The practical truth is modest and useful. If passage is an event, then someone must shepherd it. And societies everywhere build offices, songs, and objects to make sure the road has a competent crew. God and inhabitants, who rules, who feasts, who haunts. Underworlds are social worlds, courts, households, and offices where rulers, retainers, monsters, and ancestors keep the same kinds of business going after death that communities did in life. Think of the underworld as a city that never quite closed for business. There are palaces with protocol, halls with rosters, and sculleries that still need tending. In one quarter, a throne is occupied by a regal pair. This with Persephone, receiving petitions. Vizier or Osiris, in his judgment hall, measuring justice. Ereshkigal, presiding over a palace, who runs on grim courtesy. Each ruler's style, revealing what their culture most fears and most honors. Their courts are domestic administrations, attendance, table service, and the slow, proper reading of names. The point is social rather than metaphysical. Kingship continues because people recognize authority even beyond the grave. Heroic halls translate social ideals into perpetual practice. Valhalla and Folkvanga keep various sharpening spears and tasting boar. Halls rehearse honor as an occupation rather than a memory. These are working communities of the dead. Feasts are meetings, combat is continuing duty, and reputation is maintained by ritual labor. If you earn status by service in life, you keep serving. The afterlife is less a reward and more a retained post with excellent catering. Other afterworlds prefer abundance to arms. Dir Nanak, Makmer, Aru, the fields of reeds, and Jannah stage reward as sustained plenty. Gardens, rivers, reunited kin, and easy labor. The imagery teaches a civic lesson. Patience, fertility, and communal care produce returns that look like hospitality writ large. Paradise is a communal estate where the good happen to be well provided for, and where the social order is expressed through shared plenty rather than legal fines. Infernal orders look like bureaucracy at its most unhelpful. The EU and its courts, the Zoroastrian House of Lies, and similar infernal administrations run torment with procedural neatness. Officers, judges, and calibrated punishments that read like municipal enforcement. The pedagogy is civic. Wrongdoing is treated as an administrative deficit, and the infernal machinery imposes order correction. It is grisly, yes, but the architecture is recognizable. Forms to fill, hearings to attend, penalties proportionate to the breach. Guardians and monstrous enforcers occupy the thresholds. Kerberos, checks manifest at the gate. Dragons and serpents block our door with admirable seriousness. Draugar and revenants enforce household memory with a reliably awkward temper. Rusalki and water spirit seduce or punish at reedbeds. These creatures do the practical work of boundary maintenance. They are the bouncers who will not be bribed by poor etiquette. Their presence warns the living, observe obligations, or expect a very specific complaint, lodged in howl and complain. Ancestors and housed dead keep the long accounts. Monkey, goofy ancestors, pitres, and household saints are active kin. They witness, intercede, cause or bless according to how the living care for their place. An ancestor properly housed and remembered is politically capital. A patron, a judge in family disputes, a guardian of seeds and wealth. Neglect them and they become trouble. The underworld's most effective form of social sanction is the grumpy ancestor who remembers exactly who skipped the offering. Feasting, law and memory intertwine. Courts, feed, halls adjudicate, and household shrines record precedents. A funeral feast is not mere hospitality. It is an institutional act that updates the community's ledger. A mound, a carved stone, a reliquary, or a govie is a filing system. The dead are sorted into households, ranks, and duties in ways that preserve social continuity. Rulership, kinship, craft, and religious office all move across the divides, remade into afterlife offices that teach the living how to organize themselves. Also here, a comparative takeaway. The afterworld models society, kings and household, feasting and bureaucracy, guardians and ancestors. These are not metaphors only. They are worked institutions. Each culture projects its governing anxieties and its prized virtues into the country of the dead. The result is comfortingly familiar. Death does not obliterate institutions, it reenacts them, so that the living may learn how to behave by watching how the dead are housed, fed, and accounted for. So, keep your house in order, mind the offerings, and you will find the afterworld less alien and more administratively comprehensible, which, in many traditions, counts as mercy. Judgment, reward, and cultural function, while societies make postmortem economies. Judgment is a social technology as much as a metaphysical verdict. Ritual efficacy, ethical accounting, and performative competence are three currencies by which societies organize reward, punishment, and the afterlife's economy. So, there are three broad logics that run through nearly every tradition, and they do different kinds of work. First, the richer technical logic treats the afterlife as a system you can service. keep the cult working and the household continues to function. Offerings at tombs, tomb cult endowments, or state sacrifices are maintenance contracts. Think of Egyptian tomb priests tending a statue's mirror, Inca Capacocha gifts stacked on a mountain, or Mictlan's funerary kits, concrete provisioning that treats the dead as actors whose needs must be supplied. This is housekeeping with metaphysical consequences. It is civic maintenance dressed in incense. Second, the moral judicial logic reads life as a ledger. Deeds wail, scales tip, and verdicts follow. The Islamic Mizan and the Christian Last Judgment channel as grammar, charity, oath-keeping, truth-speaking. These are entries you don't want missing when the book opens. The theological rhetoric is stern, but the social effect is plain. Make moral increments into measurable habits, and you have a society that reproduces itself with fewer audits. Third, the performance competence logic prizes skill, wit, and rights. Here, the afterlife is an arena of tests and trickery, where knowledge and cunning matters as much as moral asserts. Xibalba's trials, the hero twins' cleverness, the Egyptian spells that name gates. These systems valorize competence. The lesson is civic. Practical skill, ritual literacy, and cultural savvy are as important to survival in myth as charity is in doctrine. Now, punishment come in many registers. Some traditions imagine eternal alienation or torment as a moral terminal. Others prefer cyclical chastening, purgation, or symbolic annihilation. Some cultures never quite turn punishment into theology, but treat social ills. Drought, herd sickness, poor harvests. As the lived consequences of neglected rights. The functional point is similar across types. Consequences dramatize costs, and drama teaches compliance. So, rewards are equally various. Feasting halls and martial continuities, Valhalla, Volkwangel, reward service and honor. Garden and river-based paradises, Aru, fields of reeds, Jannah, Tirnanog, pay back patience and reciprocity. Ancestral potency, housed ancestors, and state offerings confer ongoing political legitimacy. A returned harvest, a healed herd, a newly endowed shrine. These are reward language translated into the community's day-to-day. But why make these postmortem economies? Well, because they do practical civic work. You see, memorial and social insurance. Funerary provisioning redistributes wealth and secures continuity. Feasts, endowments, scovy or potlatch functions are not mere extravagance. They are social contracts that prevent the poor from being the default heirs of grief. A well-placed offering is also a policy decision. It keeps kin fit, reputations intact, and obligations visible. Moral education. Myth and ritual encode norms, tales of trickster trials, heroic tests, and last judgment scenes operate as curricula. Courage, hospitality, restraint, and reciprocity are taught by story and ritual rehearsal rather than abstract moralizing. Children learn civic habits when they see the consequences dramatized. Political technology, rulership, and legitimacy often ride on afterlife procedures. State offerings, capacochas, ancestor cults, and funerary rites anchor authority. Claim a sacred genealogy, fund perpetual ceremonies, and use stabilized claims to land and office. The data political infrastructure. Then, ecological signaling, rights and manage seasons and resources. or kupacha libations. Mayas note offerings. Steep reciprocity ritual is an adaptive technology that charts human behavior around water, fertility, and harvest cycles. In many societies, rites are early warning systems that institutionalize sustainable practices. Grief and civic repair. Ritual is therapy that happens in public. Mourning rites, burial, remembrance feasts, and reconciliatory ceremonies redistribute sorrow, restore relationships, and reintegrate mourners back into social life. The community's rituals are the scaffolding that turn private trauma into collective repair. And here's well, comparative takeaway. Judgment is often secondary to function, whether framed as scales, trials, or tune-called contracts. Postmortem economies are first and foremost tools for social regulation. They translate intangible anxieties, loss, memory, resource scarcity, political succession into actionable protocols. Who feeds the otapa? Who pays the fee? Who signs the name? A sacred ledger does normative work, code of obligations, circulate resources, teach the young, and keep the polity solvent under stress. So, if there is a modest counsel hidden in all of this, it is administrative and humane. Assign your rituals with the living in mind, a clear protocol and enduring charity, a named memorial. And these are the sorts of investments that stabilize families, shore up communes, and make careers survivable. Cultures invented afterlife economies because they needed ways to manage scarcity, memory, and power across generations. Mythic language dresses the work in poetry. The job it does is stubbornly practical. Well, look across the atlas, and one pattern stands out like a worn footpath. Underworlds are less metaphysical etudes and more civic toolkits. Rivers, dogs, bridges, and ledges are not idle flourishes. They are instruments communities use to bind the living to the dead, to discipline memory, to manage resources, and to teach how to behave when everything that matters goes quietly out of sight. The same motives recur because they work. Thresholds make obligation visible. Guides reduce the anxiety of passage. Courts project social order into death. And judgments convert folklore into repairable action. So, in short, people everywhere invent afterlives that keep the social and ecological books balanced. And it does not mean that the afterlife is not real.